Thrilled to have my next guest. It's an individual who I've been following for quite some time, somebody who has a similar yet very different story than mine. I've gone on record saying that I've led a double life for, the better part of 25 years when I was in active addiction with drugs and alcohol, but I was also a high performing sales executive with responsibilities on building content and leading the organization on leadership development. And so I'd like to introduce Lisa Kohn, an individual who you're going to be mesmerized by her story, where you see two polar opposites from a very young age introduced to the Unification Church, which I would consider a cult. And then she also spent a lot of time with her father, which at that time was a hippie into drugs. And so she was exposed to alcohol and drugs from that side. And then from her mother's side, she was introduced to the Unification Church, and just the struggles between good and evil and just the impact that it made on her life. But more importantly, the recovery that she's been able to embrace and lean into today is impressive. It has a ripple effect in what it is that she's doing as an executive coach, as a consultant. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Lisa Kohn to the Altered State podcast. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here.
Excellent. Lisa, talk to me a little bit about what I just shared. I didn't put it, I didn't put as much meat on that bone as you can. Walk me through, that tender young age of 10 years old, how you were introduced into this cult, and then ultimately the struggles that you had with the relationship with your father.
Okay, I will take a long story and make it short to start. So the way I describe my childhood, my line is the best seats I ever had at Madison Square Garden were at my mother's wedding, because I was in the Unification Church. I was a Mooney. My mom was a Mooney. She got married with 2,075 other couples in Madison Square Garden in 1981, a sea of white and black on the floor. And on the other hand, the best cocaine I ever had was from my father's friend, the judge. And someone recently said to me, he wasn't really a judge. I'm like, no, really, a judge of a small town in New Jersey, best cocaine ever. So those were the two worlds I grew up in. So long story short, my parents got pregnant before they should have, got married before they should have, had my brother at 19, me when they were 20, quickly split. It was the 60s, and it was hippie lifestyle, both of them in different ways. And my dad was wandering the world, doing drugs and hanging out. And my mom was seeking for truth and a way and all of that. And so when I was in third grade, the summer between second and third grade, my mom bought a van. We were going to drive across country to California to live on a commune. But instead, we lived in New Jersey at the time. My grandmother was diagnosed with cancer, my mom's mom, and we moved in with my grandparents. And my grandmother passed away, and we stayed with my grandfather, my mom keeping house for my grandfather. And then in January 1974, one of my mom's friends with whom she used to hitchhike across country every summer invited her to hear Reverend Sun Myung Moon speak in Princeton, New Jersey. And my mom went, and she came home a changed woman with it's amazing. He has the truth. Jesus wasn't supposed to die. It's incredible. And nothing much happened. And then a couple months later, members of the church, of the Unification Church, convinced my mom to go to Barrytown, New York, a big estate seminary where they would indoctrinate people. And my mom went up for a weekend and came back and went up for a week and came back and went up for another week and spent about, 29 out of 30 days in a month up there, and came back and took us up. And we drove up and we parked in front of the building, and we go inside of this big gymnasium with all the women, all the sisters sitting on the floor on the one side of the room, and all the men, the brothers, sitting on the floor on the other side of the room. And within moments, Reverend Sun Myung Moon walks in with his interpreter at his side and starts speaking. And that's it. We were in. He was the Messiah. He was my Messiah.
And so from that point on, you lived in this commune?
I never lived in the commune. That's what makes my story so interesting. So the Unification Church, I do call it a cult as well, is one of those cults. They had centers, but it wasn't quite communes like some cults are. But we became members, and my mom stayed and lived with us. And then slowly, we lived out in the suburbs of New York City. My mom started going in more and more to help out in the church center every day and staying over some nights. And then in January of 1975, my mom sits my brother, I have an older brother, my brother, Robbie, and I down and says to us, I feel really called. What should I do? And we say, leave, go, leave us. Um, yeah, I love that part. And so she leaves. And ironically, she leaves us with my grandfather to go move into New York City to help run the group for the people who have children and can't move into the church. Mm. And even more ironically, later on, my mom spent much of her time in the church taking care of other people's children. And to this day, I meet kids who grew up in the church and they go, oh, your mom was so good to me. And I'm like, yeah. So my mom moves in and my brother, I'm in 6th grade. My brother's in 7th grade. My grandfather is a judge. And when my grandmother died, he got depressed and he stopped practicing his cases, his law cases, and he got more depressed. And my mom left and he got more depressed. And he got disbarred. And I'm running the house. I'm shopping, I'm cooking, I'm cleaning, I'm doing.
How old are you at this point?
12, 11 or 12. Yeah. And eventually, in the beginning of 7th grade, we're living with my grandfather, and the police are doing a circle of the block on a suicide watch for him, and he's disbarred, and he's supposed to go to court and maybe to jail, and instead his doctor puts him into the psychiatric ward of the hospital. And my brother and I, Robbie and I, are pulled out of school and kind of shuffled around for a couple of weeks to friends of my grandfather's until someone tells my father, Danny, what's going on, and he comes and gets us and takes us into New York City, to the East Village in New York City, where we moved in with him. And so I always lived with my dad. I lived with Satan in my mind, right? I lived with my dad, who was sex, drugs, squalor, craziness, hippie lifestyle in the 70s in the East Village of New York City. But my life, my being, my very soul was with the Messiah, with Moon, and with my mom. But I never actually lived in the church, which gives me that whole dual life.
When you look at your relationship with your dad, right, at a young age, 10, 12 years old, 13, introduced to marijuana, alcohol, and cocaine, how did that, what's his version of parenting at that point?
I know I'm supposed to laugh, right? So my dad, and Danny, like I call him Danny because to this day, he says, I'm a person, I'm not a label, call me by my name, right? Danny, not dad, not, if you call me dad, I'll call you Dodd. If you call me daddy, I'll call you Dottie. So Danny had Robbie, my older brother, smoking pot at the age of 10 because he thought it would be cool. And to this day, I am convinced my father, he had a stroke around 13 years ago. So, but before his stroke, he was very brilliant. And I do truly believe that everything he did, he thought he was doing with our best interest in heart. Free lifestyle, it was the 70s, free love, expose the kids to all of this. But it was a lack of stability, to say the least. He used to say, don't ever shoot up smack on 2nd Avenue. If you want to shoot up smack, come upstairs because you'll pass out. If you want to shoot up speed, that's fine. You can do that downstairs, but you don't want to pass out on 2nd Avenue, so come upstairs. And those were the guidelines we were given. So it was, when I look back on it now, I realize how terrifying it was for me as a child. But the thing about growing up is it's all you know. So like until I crawled into recovery, I knew it was weird, but it's all you know. You don't know it's bad, right? And so yeah, my dad used to offer to sell me to his friends for drugs as a joke. But you don't realize these are negative influences when you're in the middle of them.
What have you taken from those experiences? Not the negative, right? I'm all about taking life experiences, whether they're negative or positive, and we're obviously addressing the negative and reframing them.
Yep.
Right. For me, therapeutically, I think it makes sense. And I've been able to reframe a lot of the hurts, hangups, addictions, issues with relationships, multiple divorces, to reframe it and reframe it. And it allows me to explain a lot of who I am. Talk to me a little bit about that for you.
Yeah. So I, again, crawled into recovery in the late 80s. I was at that point engaged to someone who drank a heck of a lot and was very mean when he did. And so I crawled into my first Al-Anon meeting, as I said to you, thinking, tell me if he's an alcoholic. There's no way I would ever be with an alcoholic, only to discover there were a multiple of reasons. And that I was highly functional on the outside, but deeply damaged on the inside. And I didn't even know it. And when I look back now, so that's the late 80s. So I've been at this for a long time, this recovery thing, right? And this healing thing. I know that everything I experienced made me who I am today. And who I am today is pretty okay, right? I've worked really hard to like who I am today and to love who I am today. And the experiences I have give me perspective to share with other people. The hurts I felt, the many things that happened to and around me, give me compassion and give me a depth of love that many people don't have. When people reach out to me experiencing different forms of trauma, the one thing I can always say is those of us who've experienced trauma often have a deeper appreciation for the basic, simple beauty of the sunshine and of daily life than people who've never experienced trauma have. And I do a lot of work now. Actually, I'm really working now on integrating every single damaged. I no longer believe I'm damaged, but I used to. But all those different parts of me, all those different lies I created in my head to survive or ways I adapt, I'm owning them and finding the beauty in them and bringing a wholer person. So I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but that's how I look back, and it is who I am, and that's cool.
You know, for me, that feeds into something that I'm seeing in my life today. And that is I'm engaging and helping individuals through this coaching platform that I built. And it's for individuals that want to shed the old past, embrace the new them, but do it do it with an emphasis and a focus and being anchored to high performance. Yeah. It's not just healing. It's, yes, of course, there's the healing component, but it's now, how do I go from this stagnant life that I've been living for 15 years? How do I then boost my mentality to embrace and adopt a high performance mindset? Yeah. And so it's so interesting. And people say, hey, I don't have an issue with drugs and alcohol, but you do. And guess what? Because you do, and because you have actually embraced recovery and you've put down the drugs and you've put the plug in the jug, you're the person that can get me there. Yeah. What are your feelings towards that? Because you said, you've been there, you understand what it feels like when you're talking to other people. How would you respond to something like that?
So the fascinating thing about publishing a memoir or having a memoir published about growing up in a cult is it gets a lot of news because cults are hot, right? And so it came out almost 2 years ago. If you Google Lisa Kohn, I'm still like the first 3 pages. If you Google my brother, I'm still on the first page. So, right. And in my day job, I own a leadership consulting and executive coaching firm, as you know, and I do leadership work like you do. And I used to have to talk around my past because I have this sort of story that literally sucks energy from the room. Everyone's like, oh, right? And nobody can talk about anything else. But now I have clients, and if they Google me, they know I grew up in a cult. They know that Al-Anon saved my life. So I just get to say, yeah, that's from AA. It still works. It absolutely works. And yeah, this is what I learned. These are the crazy things in my head, and this is how I deal with it. It's allowed me to be so authentic. So I get to show up away in people and help my clients be authentic, right? And it's like you said, high performance. It's funny when you said that. I don't think I would have ever described my life as stagnant. I don't do stagnant. Like I do high level. Like I have too much drive sometimes. But it's vibrant and it's wonderful. And I know that that's what owning the recovery. I was just having this conversation again with another second gen. Those of us who are born and or raised are called second gen, about, having to integrate all the craziness. Years ago, a therapist said to me, you need to integrate the church in order to heal. And I'm like, no way, not going near it. I did. I have to own everything that happened to me to learn from it and not let it weigh me down unconsciously. So,
It's this whole, premise around relatability,
yeah.
you know, and I think that people are looking for that. They don't want somebody, it's almost like this whole leadership development, coaching, mentoring platform. People are looking for individuals like you and I because of that relatability,
Yeah.
because we have experiences that closely match and mirror the common person, despite the fact that at one time we were borderline crazy. I've
Yeah.
earned the right to treatment facilities in 3 separate occasions,
Yeah.
but yet I can still coach to high performance because I know what low performance looks like, but more importantly, I know what it feels like.
Yeah.
And when you can attach that to the psyche and what that does to somebody and say, here is what I did to move past that, people want to hear that. People want to grab onto that.
And I would say, and I coach senior executives at Fortune 10 companies and whatever. Almost nearly all of my clients, I just teach them to love themselves more,
Mm-hmm.
right? Be nicer to themselves, be a little gentler, and let their best self show up, right? And then, which is so not business, but it's apps. I say to my clients all the time, you go take a half an hour for lunch, walk around the block, look at something beautiful. You're going to come back and do better work when you come back, right?
So good.
All these things that I needed to do to
So good.
heal, you get to hand to people who hopefully don't have the scars that you may have from what happened to you. Exactly.
What does Lisa Kohn do? And here's the thing, I ask this all the time. I am so routine based and biased.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have a routine, like I don't know how you function in life. Well, maybe not that bad, but what do you do when your feet hit the floor in the morning? Walk me through any given day, how you prepare yourself for the performance that you're so anchored to.
On my most days, on my best days, I've actually started to actually pause even more in the morning and say, it's going to be a wonderful day, and put a smile on my face. Because I do know that when we smile, our brain thinks we're happy. And when we say it's going to be a wonderful day, it more likely is. I go down and make a cup of green tea, and I sit outside when I can with my green tea for a little while. And then I meditate every single day, pretty much now for a long time. Then I do some journaling or some framing my brain into the positive sense. And then I move my body. Because if I had an addiction, it might be that I lift when one could go to the gym to lift. I run only to run with my kids. I do yoga, I practice yoga, but I move almost every day. And then I start to show up for the rest of the people.
Lisa, it's almost like, we shared notes before I asked you that question.
Was that the right thing to answer? Yes.
Well, I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer, but it mirrors what I do.
Yeah.
I am deeply anchored to my faith. The first thing I do is, I get on my knees and I thank the Lord for the day he gave me.
Yeah.
And obviously allowing me to sleep through the night and give me a chance to perform at a high level again. Right. But to your point, it's about like meditation. It's about like taking time alone. And I need to be alone that first hour and a half, because it gives me an opportunity to really plan my day and really slow down when my mind wants to go really fast. And this whole premise around, like exercise and you nailed it, right? It's this whole premise around movement. Yeah. Here at Altered State, we live by 4 different pillars, right? 1 is positive mindset, 2 is grit, 3 is the ability to overcome obstacles, and 4 is movement. Yeah. Because as human beings, we were made to move. And so I can relate, again, to use it. Like, this is the reason why you and I get along so well, is because this whole relatability, right? Yeah. And I get it. And regardless of whether you've been in recovery or not, these are things that, successful people do in the morning.
It's interesting you talk about faith, because growing up in a cult, growing up in what we now know to term religious abuse. When I
Mhm.
left, I could not believe in anything because if I thought about God, it was the God I grew up with. And when I left, I still believed Moon was the Messiah. I just didn't want to do it anymore. So I needed to die. I deserved to die for abandoning God and breaking God's heart and all that stuff that was given to me. And when I crawled into recovery again, like, and they said you need a higher power, I slowly let faith back into my life. I don't practice any specific religion because I like to say my God is love, God, Goddess, God X, whatever. I believe in love and that universal force, and that's what I talk
Beautiful.
to, line
Beautiful.
myself with, and spread. That's the message I spread. Yeah, but I'm very spiritual, not religious. That's how I describe myself. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not about religion. It's
Hmm.
not about that structure or that platform where you have to follow a certain. So Lisa, you were sharing how deeply anchored you are to love, and for me, I've almost been a little bit rebellious in the corporate world. I wouldn't say I go as far as telling people I love them at work, but I do. Well, you know what? That's okay. It's
Yeah.
this language that people are afraid to use, and I think as a leader, it's important to act in a certain way that really embodies love.
Yeah.
And I think you can do it in a way without saying it,
Hmm.
and it has to do with being an empath. It has to do with understanding the dynamics of personalities and really being having the ability to lean in during these times and talk to employees. When you talk to your clients
Hmm.
about this very specific topic, what comes up?
On my client side, when I say, so yeah, years ago, my mentor coach said to me, your only job is to love your clients. Right. And that is truly how I do a lot of things in the work I do, but it's creating that space and holding that love is a lot of it. And when I bring that up to clients, when I bring up the fact that as I always say to them, or I've said to like their spouses or to them, like I adore you in a completely appropriate way.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm. That's a great way to say it.
Because yeah, completely appropriately, I think you're amazing kind of thing. And then when I point out to clients that that's their role as well, it's this sense of hesitation, right? Like, what if I get shamed for it? We're not allowed to use that word here, right? But also freedom, because we, as human beings, right, we just want to connect with other people, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you go back to the cult, right, why are cults so prevalent and so intoxicating? Because as human beings, we crave connection and community, we crave certainty, and we crave purpose. Those are the three things we truly, truly want. And so in a cult, you have absolute certainty, purpose beyond belief, and a community like no other. Right? But so if you bring it back to work, if that's what I'm craving at work as a leader, how do I give my people, especially now, certainty when there's no certainty, right? How do I help them find purpose in what we're doing? And how do I help them feel connected? And we are hive animals. We need other people, even introverts. We all need other people. So there, it's that combination of hesitation and trepidation and kind of freedom and, oh, I can actually care about people and it's an okay thing.
Beautiful. When you look at your academic background,
Mm-hmm.
it's very impressive. Columbia, NYU. Talk to me a little bit about what those degrees are in, and if you're using them now, and if you're taking the learnings from that environment into what you do now as an executive coach.
Yeah, so it's actually my undergraduate degree is at Cornell, far above Cayuga's waters, and it's in psychology,
Okay.
which is kind of hilarious because when I started to pull away from the church. It's a long story of what happened, but truly senior year of high school and freshman year of college is when I really started to pull away. So my experience at Cornell, I always say, is very tainted because I was not okay up here, right? One does not leave something like that easily. But I have a degree in psychology because I like people. And it probably plays into what I do, but I don't I don't even know that it does because I've taken it and studied so many ways further than that. The funny thing about Columbia, so I have an executive MBA from Columbia because many lives ago, I like to say, I worked in advertising and entertainment advertising in New York City, and somehow convinced my boss to convince the head of the company to send me for an executive MBA, which is just radically crazy if you know anything about that world, that they would pay for it and let me have time off. And it was at Columbia where I, one, realized I was smart and could actually have an opinion that was worthwhile, and two, discover these disciplines in which I now play of leadership and organizational development and all sorts of that stuff, because I just didn't know they existed. So it truly, that's what, I mean, I got my degree and then I left my job and I went to work in not-for-profit for a while and was miserable because you haven't met me, but I used to be under 5 foot. Now I'm probably under 4'10". And we don't talk about that. And I left my job in entertainment advertising to go work for someone who I think just wanted to push me around. And he liked to fight with me because I was fun to fight with him. And so I was miserable and I hung out. I quit my job at 3 months pregnant with my first kid and hung out at Shingle to do leadership, not actually knowing what that was in 1995. And I had a bunch of professors who would give me jobs and kind of mentor me along. And I've been doing this business ever since. So Cornell, not so much. Psychology degree, you think maybe, but not really, except when I go and study more. And then the MBA just gave me it introduced me to the disciplines and gave me the confidence that I had something worth sharing, because I didn't have a lot of self-esteem coming from where I came from.
For me, because there's still moments where I think of the tragedy and the chaos that I created and the carnage that I left behind. It really is behind, and I've, incinerated it. I really have. But when I started studying at Brown and all of my cohort members were, Harvard and UPenn and Dartmouth and Cornell and Columbia. And I also have an MBA, but, from the University of Miami, which is, still a respectable institution, but it's not Ivy. And so I went in there with a little bit of an imposter syndrome. Like, do I belong here? Like, I'm an addict in recovery. Yeah, I get it. I can lead people and lead organizations, but have I earned my seat here? And it was in that environment where I said, I belong here. Yeah. I really, and for me, it's, aside from the academic principles that you're leaning into and embracing as a professional, that's one thing. But I think for me is the ability to almost just find fascination, at least for me. I'm talking from this recovering addict. I find fascination in knowing that I came from such a dark place to now sitting in Brown with, healthcare leaders, CEOs, CFOs, Amgen, you name it, nonprofits, physicians, #1 transplant surgeon in the country. And here I am. They had no idea that I was an addict in recovery. They knew later on because I'm very open about it. But it's funny how you struggle with that imposter syndrome.
Yeah. It's funny. I was talking to a client today who happens to be in her 20s. She was talking about her imposter syndrome. And I wanted to say, of course you have it in your 20s, which is also true, right? Not that you should, but, of course you're going, why am I here? But I said I have clients who are in their 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s. And so many of us walk around with imposter syndrome, right? Until finally, through the grace of whatever, you come to know, and I coach people on this all the time, what I do bring. We need to know the value we bring. We need to know the strengths we have. We need to stand in that power. We need to own that power. I'm not saying I'm the most amazing person in the world, but I got a lot to offer, right? And that's also where I coach clients to go, to walk in with the confidence that you have something of value to bring. And for those of us who have pasts that make us think we didn't or don't or did, but we blew it up, it's an incredibly harder path to get to, but it's still, you need to know the beauty of you just for being here, just telling your story, just sitting in that space, right?
How has this Zoom environment changed your business? I hear a lot of examples that say, hey, it's dramatically improved, my coaching, leadership, mentoring, business. And that, by the way, this category that we're talking about is going to continue growing at an alarming rate, because it's needed. People are no longer relying on the corporation or the company they work in to help coach them to get to the next level. They have to hire outside help. So how is this environment, post COVID, in the midst of COVID, sorry, how has that helped you or hurt you?
Well, it's interesting because my business partner and I have said for years, we're out of this before it goes virtual. Oh, well. So I would say we're fine. Like the coaching, I've had clients who did have to scale back because budgets are tight. And I've had 5 or 6 new clients that I've gotten since March, right? And that continues to grow. The coaching is a very easy thing to do. And when I coach generally half in person and half on the phone, because I hear in a completely different level when I'm not with someone in a room. And Zoom allows me to do some of that as well. So I think this is great. We are just about to start. So we do coaching, we do development programs, and we're just about to start really working with teams virtually in development. It's possible, it's different, and that's cool too. The one that's really stumbling me is we do a lot of facilitation, leadership team facilitation, strategic conversations, tough conversations facilitation. And one of my skills, my gifts, is the ability to read a room, and I'm a child of an alcoholic, right? Read a room and see the energies and feel everything going on and kind of navigate it. And that I haven't figured out totally how to do in a virtual environment. It's really hard to hold everybody's emotions and space and psychic when they're all just a video screen. So that's the part that I'm still like, but it's all possible.
We've talked about development quite a bit. What is maybe 1 or 2 things that Lisa Kohn is working on for herself?
1 or 2 things I'm working on for myself.
Let's keep it at 1.
Let's keep it at 1.
Let's give it all the value and attention it needs.
Yeah, so with the COVID, and I call it the revolution that's happening right now, I don't do DEI work, diversity, equity, and inclusion work. It just kind of aligns alongside of what we do in many ways. And I am a confidant consultant to a lot of my clients around that. So I'm personally spending a lot of time pushing myself even further in the looking at race, looking at racism, looking at equity, looking at the multitude of the world and what we have, and how do we take this moment of COVID and lockdown and riots and everything going on and emerge a more loving, powerful, beautiful society. So that's kind of it.
Is there like a certain framework or platform that you're building for that, or is that just conversation that comes easy to you, and as a result of that, you're almost tailoring or customizing it to that one individual? Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. Yeah. I mean, I have a list of resources for my clients and a lot of conversations and models, but it's just, I have the ability to get people to talk about things that are hard to talk about. And for some reason, I have the ability for them to listen to me.
Awesome.
And trust what I say. So I will, there are very few things I will say, I know this to be true. I've had truth, right? And it's a powerful, intoxicating feeling. And there's very little of it in the world that's really truth with a capital T. But I like to engage people. Just kind of, all I want to do is break people's minds open a little bit. I'm fully aware of a bunch of things. These are things I do know. I do know that we make up stories all day long about ourselves and about other people. I make up stories for a living. And I do know that stories get in our way of connecting. Like my story about you may have nothing to do with who you really are, right? And so I like helping people crack open their brains to just begin to say, oh, maybe that person doesn't actually think that about me. Maybe I'm making that all up. Maybe that person isn't really like this. Let me have a conversation with that person and see what's really going on. So I don't know if that's what you're looking for, but that's where I took it.
You know, I could like I was just about to say that is beautifully stated.
Thank you.
I'm not kidding. You know, this whole because it does happen even for me. Like this whole story, like you live in these stories that, you know, may or may
Yeah.
not be true. And I often tell the individuals that I work with and I'm coaching right now, you know, careful with what you think because thoughts become things.
Yeah.
And that's dangerous
Yeah.
if you don't really take the time to pause and say, hey, where is this coming from? This
Yeah.
is coming from like you know, like a deep childhood memory where
Hmm.
I felt stung. I'm like letting it come back up, and now I'm, you know, I'm sizing this person up. And that's not fair to this person because they're not doing anything wrong.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
um,
Absolutely.
Lisa, I want to make sure that the listeners, subscribers know where to find you. Talk to us a little bit about that. You know, your book, which is To the Moon and Back, which is a fantastic book. I'm halfway through, and but I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to, you know, talk about it. Can you walk us through that?
Absolutely. The hardest part is that my name is Kohn, but it's spelled Kohn. So why do I say that? To find me, so my website is lisakohnwrites.com, as in LISAKOHNWRITES.com. That's my writing website. And all of my social media is at Lisa Kohn Writes. And if you Google Lisa Kohn, again, I'm the first three pages that show up, last I checked. And then my business is Chatsworth Consulting. So that's Chatsworth Consulting Group, and that's chatsworthconsulting.com. And that's where all the, and they kind of connect to each other. That's where all the work lies. And then the Lisa Kohn Writes is where all the personal memoir story stuff lies. So, and I love to
Beautiful.
connect with anyone about anything. As I say, my story is unique. Only my older brother has a similar story so far of these two crazy conflicting worlds. But the themes are unfortunately so universal. I get people from all different backgrounds, some with trauma, some without whatever, who identify with the, you know, I say as a species, we're all too hard on ourselves, self-critical, self-judging, self-lambasting, and we need a huge dose of self-love and self-compassion. And I see people all over from that. I say to anyone who feels hopeless or damaged beyond repair, there is hope and you're not damaged. And the publishing of the book, I realized that I still thought I was damaged. I have damage. I have scars. I'm not damaged. And that, for anyone who's been through that, Sunny, you're smiling, right? That process of knowing, yeah, it's not all beautiful, but I'm not broken. It's a wonderful feeling. So I like to share that with
Listen,
anyone.
I'll leave you with this. The scars that I see in Lisa are absolutely beautiful. Okay. Because everybody has their own story, scars. It's how you communicate them, it's how you accept them, and it's how you reframe them to hopefully give somebody else hope that despite the negative, you can still embrace and lead into the positive. And you are
Absolutely.
a beautiful example of that. I know that, you know, our, you know, relationship is not over now. I think it's just starting.
Yep.
I'm excited for our future for, you know, potentially making a series within the Altered State podcast, and you know, we'll have an opportunity to dialogue through that. My sincere thank you to you
Thank you.
because I often say that one of the most finite resources is time. You've given me 45 minutes of it. And so for that, I'm indebted to you for your time, your consideration, the, you know, the just giving us, you know, a sneak peek behind the curtain, behind what's happening with Lisa and all the beautiful things that have occurred in your life. So congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's been a gift.
Thank, thank you, Lisa.